Hello and welcome to a very special B1M video where we are joined by Amanda Clack, President of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which many of you will know as the RICS, and also partner at EY. Thank you very much for being with us, Amanda.
It's a pleasure, it's great to be here.
Thank you for having us. Before we move on to talk about some of the issues facing the industry, I want to find out a bit about your background, if that's okay. How did you go from being at school, like the rest of us, to being President of the RICS?
In many ways, I don't know. I still have to pinch myself that it's actually happened. But I kind of blame a Hornby train set and probably Lego as probably the early kind of interest, particularly in construction and infrastructure. And we had the M25 motorway that came quite near my family home. And I used to go out with the Clerk of Works on a Saturday and ride around in his Land Rover, which was incredibly exciting. I see these big earth moving equipment and basically got really inspired to move into the construction industry. I'd also worked for my father's business, which was an electronics company, for over the summer. And it kind of made me realise some of what I didn't want to do, which was to kind of be in a room with a computer, just doing computer programming. I wanted to be out there and making a difference. And also, I didn't want every day to be the same. And I feel like the luckiest girl alive in that literally when I started work, I was doing a day release degree over 5 years. And from the moment that I started both work and effectively university at the time, I just loved it. And when you love it, you're just naturally good at it. And I've just kind of gone from, really core quantity surveying, then started to get involved in big programs, program management. I went off and did a master's again part-time for 2 years. Along the way, I've added a bit of business and law and, basically have just worked on some amazing projects for clients, amazing engagements, and also with some fantastic teams over the years. But I got involved in RICS quite early on, and as a relative youngster, I think it's kind of fantastic opportunity to get involved with the RICS because in many ways it gives you the opportunity to get involved in whether it's developing guidance notes or sitting on boards and committees and just mixing with different professionals, but actually from your own profession. And I found myself, chairing what was at the time our National Association for England and Wales when I was just in my 20s. And that's just great exposure and a great opportunity to be chairing, a really significant board. And I've always believed that if you want to make a difference, you roll your sleeves up and get involved in something. And that's literally what I've done with RICS. And it's such an honour to represent the members that we have literally all over the world. And it still sort of bowls me over when I'm travelling for RICS now as president, where people come up to me and they say, wow, RICS is such an amazing profession and the global footprint is fantastic. We literally got out of a car, we were going in to see some government ministers in Hong Kong. We got out of the car and just by where we got to, there was some students with their lecturer and they had the theodolite and they were kind of like, doing some measurements around. And I said, I've got to go, we've got to say hello to them because they're clearly surveyors. And that's typically what people think of surveyors. And we went over and they were just bowled over by the fact that they said, we never thought we'd get to meet the president of RICS. And I was thinking, wow, oh yeah, that's me. Yeah, but there's so much to surveying, so much more actually beyond the theodolite that people typically think. And I think as the industry is going through rapid, fast-paced change now, that there's more opportunity to get involved in data analytics, management, commercial management, the whole valuation side. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Now you're in that role, now you've reached that position. What is the one thing, you have to pick one thing above everything else that you'd like to achieve during your presidency? What would that be and why?
I think every president wants to leave some form of legacy. And for me, my legacy is, I've got 3 themes this year, which is infrastructure, cities and the war for talent. And I'd kind of find it hard to split and pick out one of those. But if I can kind of sneak maybe infrastructure and cities together, because
Sure.
you almost can't do one without the other.
No, indeed.
And I think when you look at, there's a $57 trillion infrastructure gap through to 2030, and you've also got 66% of the world's population going to live in cities by 2050. That means that there's a big opportunity around the built environment, and I want to make sure that our members are at the heart of that, giving good advice to our clients. But kind of to do that, you have to have the right people in the profession, and that's where the war for talent comes in, because it's actually about how do we attract the next generation into the profession, how do we keep the people that we've got, and how do we train them and develop them as we move forward.
That leads me into a very important issue, which is gender imbalance.
Yeah.
There's been 133 presidents of the RICS since 1868, and prior to yourself, just one of them was a woman. You're one of very few female leaders that we have in our industry, and gender imbalance across the piece remains a significant issue. Why do you think that is, and what more can we do tangibly to inspire women into this industry?
Wow, that's a really great question. I love it. So yeah, second female. I'm actually the 135th president in 148 years of RICS history, and I think as we go into next year and then on into 2018 to our 150th, it's a really important time to look at this war for talent. The whole thing on war for talent came out of some work we were doing with RICS Futures. We produced a report a couple of years ago now called Our Changing World, Let's Be Ready. It's kind of box office hit when you look at YouTube. It's had 28,000 viewings of the video, and it's available in different languages. But the number one thing that employers were saying they were worried about was the war for talent, and in particular when you look at gender diversity. So we're sitting in a profession that still has only 13% of its membership as females. So, and that's 1-3, that's not 30. And we've got to do more to change the dial. When it comes to students and trainees, we're doing better. It's 24%. And there's a real opportunity with those next generation to really make sure that they stick with and grow into the profession. Doing lots of things on it. We've got some awards coming up literally next month, which is around Women of the Future. So 3 years ago, we worked with the Women of the Future team, and we realised that there wasn't actually an award recognising women in real estate construction and infrastructure. So RICS actually sponsor that, and the quality of the entrants that we get is superb. And actually the volume of the quality of the entrants we get is phenomenal. And picking one winner out of that is really tough. I'm really glad I don't have to do it, I have to say. So doing awards like that, because the one thing that people say they want to see is more role models out there, actually just talking about what they do. And I think, there's one message I could give to everybody, men or women, is just talk about what you do and encourage the next generation in, but particularly women. And I think, one of the problems we have is the stereotypical image of the construction industry or property industry. And we need to kind of dispel that. And there's some exciting things. You educate the educators, which is the parents and the teachers. You have to inspire the next generation. We're working with Class of Your Own, particularly in terms of going into schools. We're looking at technologies like Minecraft, for example, and how that can help inspire the next generation. We're looking at getting some things out onto television that actually talk about what surveyors do in a positive way. And then also it's back to the role models. We've also got Young Surveyor of the Year coming up. And you hear the stories that these young professionals have to tell about why they love doing what they're doing. We've got this great campaign, #LoveSurveying and #SurveyingTheFuture, which is basically about people saying why they love what they do. And that's again about inspiring that next generation. We also launched the Inclusive Employer Quality Mark, which is then, it's kind of taking it on a different level, which is how do we look at not just gender imbalance, but actually the whole inclusivity. We're trying it here in the UK, first of all. It's gone incredibly well. We have over 100 firms that are signed up to it. We've done some analysis across the data that we received earlier on this year. We've got a report called Building Inclusivity, Laying the Foundations for the Future that was published in June. In that, it gives us the first baseline of the sector by the sector. And that really, if you actually understand the point at which you're starting from, you can then start to understand some of the things you need to do differently, and you can measure it. So what gets measured gets done. And we're working with all of our sort of like major corporates and SMEs in how do we kind of really build in that inclusive employer into like everyday practice, and hopefully that will start to make a difference.
Fantastic. What do you say to those young girls who are thinking about their career choices, and they look at the construction industry and they see those stereotypes, they see the male dominance, the sort of rough and ready perspective that we can sometimes get of the industry? What would you say to them making that decision now?
Just do it. Because it's just, I think when you look at what we do, you know, you walk down every street in every part of the UK or the world, and the buildings, the environment that's around you has in some way a surveyor's been involved with it. So the opportunity to really make a difference to where people literally live, work and play is there. So you're making a difference to people's lives. We just had our ICS awards last week, and in fact it was the year before, one of the companies who was there said, could I bring one of the head teachers from class of your own, where we're working with them, to come and meet you, Amanda? So I said, yeah, of course. And he said to me, Amanda, I've got it. He said, it's not about the built environment. These awards are not about the built environment. They're actually about making a difference to people's lives and building communities. And I think, you know, that's the message that we need to get out to, you know, young girls in particular, that take this opportunity to get involved in a career, in a profession that can really make a difference to people's lives.
Turning now to talk about another issue, which is skills shortages. Construction is facing a very severe skills shortage. We need something like 220,000 people to join the industry by 2019.
Yeah.
What more do you think we can do to inspire young people generally to join the industry?
I think, I mean, you're right, there's a massive skills shortage, and we really need to kind of portray the industry and make it interesting to people that really get it. I think, you know, programs like the Crossrail programme last time when it was published, and it talks about the engineering and the construction, and people can really relate to it, particularly, you know, if they're here in London, but also anywhere in the world, you know, big construction projects, and actually talking about, you know, what's involved now as either a surveyor or a person working in construction, and sort of myth busting when it comes to those stereotypical images of how people might perceive it. Because I think for every kind of one of those negative images, I could probably quote you 10 sort of really great examples of, you know, some really fantastic projects and programs that people are just getting on with and building. You know, this is an amazing time to be in the infrastructure and construction. You know, you look at kind of like the government expenditure, the pressure on housing, and therefore the demand that there's going to be, you know, to build more houses in this country, the whole, you know, Northern Powerhouse, Midlands Engine piece, so investment kind of going up to the north. You're talking about new bridges kind of going across the Thames. You know, everything to me is about construction. So I say to people, you know, one, the RICS qualification is a passport to the future, and it also allows you to work and practice anywhere in the world. So you can literally, once you've got your RICS qualification, that qualification is recognised in, you know, Canada, US, Brazil, China, India, Australia. So you can go anywhere you want. So you'll never be out of a job. So if you want job certainty, this is a great career to be in.
Coming back to talk about smart cities, by the year 2050 it's expected that something like 6 billion people worldwide are going to be living in cities. You lead the world's largest professional body in land, property and the built environment. What role do you think construction can play in enabling quality of life, sustainable living and economic growth in those cities?
Well, there's lots of bits to that question. It's a really big question with probably a really big answer. I think, the obvious one is massive impact. You know, whether it comes to looking at how the next generation is going to live and work and operate in cities, the silver-haired generation. We've done some work, particularly in Hong Kong, which has got the fastest ageing demographic living in a city. So we've done some research around that. So there's a generational issue. There's looking at green space and how do you value green space when there's increasing pressure within cities to keep building, because land is obviously a premium. How do you make sure that you have the green space within cities? And also kind of linked with that is obviously your point around the whole sustainability issue, which is where we're very much involved with the UN Global Compact and COP21 now kind of coming into COP22, thinking about how do you build in sustainability into buildings. And sustainability is everything from building new, shiny, benchmark, landmark buildings around the world, but it's also about how do you regenerate existing buildings to make sure that they're, they've got a longer lifespan sort of going forward. I think, we're getting increasing pressures on the cities where people are having to live in closer proximity to one another. There's the whole issue of, what's the impact of things like autonomous vehicles on the city of the future. So a lot of the work that we and our members are doing is actually thinking about cities today. So you have cities in developing countries, for example, like India or Africa, where there's a different priority. When you talk about a smart city or a resilient city, you've got to kind of be thinking about what does that mean. And it might be as simple as it's about waste, it's about fresh running water, and it's about a regulated power supply. But again, our members are involved in sort of thinking that through and working with clients to help enable all of those. But then you've got developing or developed cities like London, New York, Paris, whatever, where you've got an existing infrastructure and you've still got to make that city future-proof. So how do you build in fibre optic networks, 5G potentially here in the UK? What does that mean? And again, helping to think that through. And what's the impact on housing? How do you get that blended mix of social housing, private rented sector, and obviously owner-occupier housing? And how do we make sure that everybody's got a really good standard and quality of life? We're thinking about all of that. And then it's the infrastructures to actually service those cities. So we've done some work looking at the hub and the place, it's called. And that compares 3 case studies. One is King's Cross, London, the other is Kakaduma in India, and the third one is Guangzhou in China. And it basically is a very, very different kind of countries, governance structures, economic, political background, but actually looks at where you invest in a hub, in this case a station, what's the wider benefit, economic benefit that can actually be driven by investment in that hub. And actually the similarities between those 3 locations are quite apparent. So I think strategic investment in infrastructure in our cities is really important. So literally, our members are just embedded in a lot of that thinking.
Just a final question, if I may, and it's another 2-parter, I'm afraid. What frustrates you most about construction? And in turn, what inspires you most about the industry?
I think one of the frustrations is where you look at some of the margins and just how margins are really pushed down in construction. And you use the word frustration, and I'm kind of homing in on that specifically in my answer, because I think the frustration then is if you've got margins, so I get clients want value for money, absolutely get that. But if you push the margins to such a low level and you're buying entirely on price, I think you're stifling the innovation that's inherent within the construction industry. And I think you watch what the construction industry is capable of, and we see a lot of it now. You've got 3D printing, off-site manufacture. That's really exciting. BIM, the opportunity around level 3 BIM for the sector is fantastic, but you need to have the funding available to actually for clients and the construction industry to kind of really start to come together to actually allow that innovation to drive forward. In terms of what inspires me, I think it's back maybe to one of my earlier answers, which is the fact that you're making a difference to people's lives, and it's very tangible. You know, if you ever want to, if you ever want an interesting evening out, I'd take a bunch of surveyors on a walk around a city, and basically they're all pointing at their buildings and saying, "This is my building." So people take real pride and ownership in the fact that in some small part you had a role in playing in something that's going to be around for the next, 50 to hundreds of years' time. And I really love that. So it's kind of back to your first question, which was around legacy. And for me, what really inspires me about construction is I think you're really leaving a tangible legacy for people, and it is all about that.
Amanda Clack, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks very much, Fred. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. If you enjoyed that video, don't forget to take a look at the other clips on the B1M, and if you like what you see, subscribe.